Have you ever wondered why some people seem to become freer over time, while many others work more and more, yet their lives feel increasingly confined? You try, you persist, you don't give up, but somewhere inside you still feel like you're standing still, like running at full speed on a treadmill, more sweat, more effort, but the scenery in front of you never changes. And then I learned a very simple but very painful truth. Every path to freedom has tuition. The question isn't whether you want freedom or not, it's whether you're willing to pay the price. Life doesn't reject anyone, it simply presents a bill and lets you decide whether you'll sign it or not. Many people tell me, I want to be wealthier, I want more options. I want to live life my own way. But when I ask, what are you willing to sacrifice? What new skill are you willing to learn? What comfortable habit are you willing to give up? The room suddenly goes silent. I still remember my own early years. I worked hard. I read books while others were entertaining themselves. I learned new skills while my friends were resting. No one applauded. No one noticed. No one thought it meant anything. But then I realized a seed doesn't need an audience. It only needs enough discipline to keep growing in silence. And in today's video, I want to share with you 8 core principles about limits, sacrifice, and new skills. The prices that anyone who truly longs for real freedom must pay. If you're feeling stuck, if you know you were meant for more than this, then stay until the end of the video. Because there's one thing I wish I had understood many years earlier, and it could completely change how you see your own future. Principle 1, every freedom has tuition. There is one thing I learned very early on, even though I wasn't wise enough at the time to name it. There is no path to freedom that doesn't demand a price. Life never gives anything for free, it only trades. We're used to the idea that education requires tuition. If you want to go to college, you pay money. If you want to learn a trade, you invest time. But when it comes to financial freedom, freedom of choice, freedom to live life your own way, many people believe it will come through luck or through some kind of breakthrough opportunity. And that's where most people start wrong. Freedom is also a school, and its tuition isn't paid with money up front. It's paid with discipline, with sacrifice, with doing hard things when no one is forcing you to. I've met many people who told me, I want more time, I want more freedom. I don't want to spend my whole life just paying bills. But when I asked them what tuition they were paying for that, the answer was usually nothing clear at all. They still stay up late for things that bring no value. They still spend money to buy short-term comfort. They still postpone learning the skills their future is demanding. And then they're surprised when life sends them another bill, the bill of being stuck. I've been there. I worked hard but didn't go far. Not because I lacked effort, but because I wasn't paying the right kind of tuition. I did a lot, but I didn't learn enough. I was busy, but I didn't upgrade myself. And then I realized life doesn't reward hard work. It rewards preparation. If you want a higher level of freedom, you must accept a higher level of discipline. If you want more options in the future, you must accept less comfort in the present. This is a fair trade, but it's not comfortable. Like a student entering their first year of college. No one sees the value of studying every night. No one applauds the silent hours of reading. But a few years later, that degree opens doors others don't have the keys to. Freedom works the same way. When you learn while others are entertaining themselves, when you save while others are spending, when you train while others complain, you are quietly paying tuition for a life they can only dream of. And I want you to understand this clearly. The tuition for freedom always increases over time. If you don't pay it early, life will charge interest in the form of regret. You can pay with discipline today or pay with pain tomorrow. You can pay with focus or pay with a limited future. And here's the question I want you to ask yourself. Not to answer me, but to answer your own life. Are you paying tuition for freedom, or are you paying the cost of procrastination? Because no matter what you choose, you will pay, and that is only the first lesson. And remember, when you understand that limits are not walls blocking your path, but simply starting points, you will begin to see life through completely different eyes. Principle 2, limits are not prisons, they are starting points. There is a mistake I see repeated by so many people. They look at their current circumstances and call it a sentence. They say, I was born into this family. I don't have connections. I don't have a degree. I started too late. And And then they conclude, that's it. But I want to tell you something very important. Limits are not places for you to stay. They are only places for you to start. Life doesn't ask where you start. It only watches what you do with that starting point. I've met people who began with very little, limited money, limited knowledge, limited opportunities. But they had one thing many others didn't: awareness. They understood that whatever they lacked was pointing directly to their next area of growth. If you lack money, that's not a curse. It's a signal that you need to learn how to create value. If you lack confidence, that's not who you are. It's an invitation to build competence. If you lack opportunity, that's not injustice. It's a sign that you need to become someone worthy of opportunity. When I started my career, I didn't have what others had, but I had a choice: either complain about what I lacked or build what my circumstances were demanding. And I learned a very important lesson. You don't overcome limits by fighting them. You overcome them by growing from the inside. Limits are like the first step on a staircase. You don't stand there complaining that it's low. You stand there to step onto the next one. But many people never step. They stay on the first step for years, simply because they think that's where they belong. The truth is this: no one is stuck because their starting point is low. People are stuck because they refuse to upgrade themselves. I've seen young people say they're too early, and I've seen older people say they're too late. Both are wrong. You are never too early to learn discipline, and you are never too late to learn a skill. Limits of age, circumstance, background, they are all just numbers and stories. What matters is whether you dare to rewrite that story. Look directly at your limits. No judgment, no complaining. Just observe and ask, what kind of person is this asking me to become? Because every limit carries a lesson, and every lesson is a door if you are humble enough to learn. And I want you to remember this: limits don't disappear before you change. They disappear after you change. You don't need a perfect starting point. You only need the right direction. And when you understand that you're not stuck, you're simply standing at the starting line, you'll stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is my next step? And that is exactly where many people begin to hesitate. Because when you know you need to take the next step, you also know that some kind of sacrifice is waiting for you ahead. Principle 3, sacrifice isn't loss, it's a transaction. Most people are afraid of sacrifice. Not because sacrifice is too painful, but because they don't know what they're buying. When you hear the word sacrifice, your brain immediately thinks of loss. Lost time, lost comfort, lost familiar pleasures that help us forget our exhaustion for a moment. But I want you to pause for a second and look at it from a different angle. Sacrifice isn't giving up life. Sacrifice is choosing to buy a different life. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are still shopping. You buy comfort by procrastinating. You buy a pleasant feeling by avoiding what's hard. You buy fake peace of mind with familiar habits. And you can also buy freedom, but its price tag isn't on the shelf, and it can't be paid in installments with promises. A lot of people tell me, I don't have time, I'm too tired, I need rest. But the truth is this: you always have time for what you prioritize. The only question is, what are you prioritizing? Comfort today or freedom tomorrow? I used to think sacrifice was for people who were too strict with themselves. I used to believe life needed balance, that I deserved comfortable moments, even when my results didn't deserve them at all. And then I realized something painful but true. You can't buy a bigger future with small purchases of ease. Sacrificing 1 hour a day to learn a new skill isn't losing an hour. It's investing an hour. Saying no to a comfortable habit, to build discipline, isn't punishing yourself. It's freeing yourself from a limited future. Sacrifice only hurts when you think you're losing. But when you understand you're buying, it starts to make sense. And when it makes sense, it becomes sustainable. Think about someone who decides to study at night. After a tiring day of work, he could choose the couch, a familiar entertainment show, and the feeling of today was enough. But he chooses books, chooses skills, chooses silence. No one praises him. No one applauds. No one knows what he's doing. There is only exhaustion and a vision big enough to keep him sitting there. A few years later, when opportunity shows up, he doesn't panic, doesn't chase, doesn't beg. He's ready. Not because he's luckier than others, but because he prepaid for that future with sacrifices no one could see. And here's what I want you to understand deeply. Life always makes you pay a price, but you get to choose when you pay. You can pay now with conscious discipline by doing the hard thing when no one is forcing you. Or you can pay later with regret, with the feeling of, if only I had started sooner. No one is exempt from this bill. The only difference is how you pay it. If you're sacrificing right now and you feel bitter, maybe it's not because the sacrifice is wrong. Maybe it's because you still can't see clearly what you're buying. When you have a clear enough vision, you won't complain about the price anymore. Because you know every time you say no to ease today is a time you say yes to freedom tomorrow. And I want you to ask yourself, not to answer me, but to answer your own life. What in your life needs to be purchased with discipline, not with excuses? If these thoughts are hitting exactly where you are right now, hit subscribe to continue the journey with me, where we learn how to pay the right price so we don't have to live a life smaller than our potential. And remember, sacrifice is only the middle step, because to turn sacrifice into real freedom, you need one more thing. New skills your future is quietly demanding. Principle 4, old skills can't buy a new future. There's a truth many people don't want to face. The world doesn't pay for effort. It pays for value. You can work very hard. You can stay busy all day. You can be exhausted every night. But if your skills don't change, your results won't change either. I've met so many kind, hardworking, well-intentioned people, and yet they're still stuck at the same income level, the same life loop, year after year. Not because they lack work ethic, but because they're bringing yesterday's skills to negotiate with the future. Life isn't against you. The market doesn't hate you. It simply asks a very fair question. What problems can you solve? And the answer to that question is determined by the skills you have. You don't get paid based on how many years you've worked. You don't get paid based on how many hours you've sacrificed. You get paid based on the value you can create when someone needs you. I used to think loyalty and persistence were enough. I used to believe that if I stayed long enough, if I tried hard enough, then results would come. But life taught me a crystal clear lesson. Loyalty can't replace competence. You can be loyal to a job, but if you don't learn additional skills, you're just being loyal to stagnation. You can be loyal to a habit, but if that habit doesn't create new value, it won't lead you to freedom. Look at any turning point in life. There is always a new skill behind it. The person who moved from manual labor to management learned how to lead. The person who moved from low income to high income learned how to solve bigger problems. The person who moved from passive to free learned how to create value other people are willing to pay for. Skills are the language of opportunity. If you don't speak that language, opportunity can be standing right in front of you, and you still won't hear it. Many people hope the future will be easier. They hope things will improve automatically. But the truth is this, the future only opens up when you become more valuable as a person. You can't demand the level of freedom of a highly skilled person while keeping the skill set of a beginner. And this isn't criticism, it's an invitation to ask yourself, which of my skills is helping me move forward? And more importantly, which of my skills is holding me back? Because there are skills that once helped you survive, but won't help you grow. There are things that were enough for yesterday, but won't be enough for tomorrow. And I want you to remember this. Every new level of freedom requires a new level of competence. You can't walk into a bigger room with the same old key. Think about your own market value, not emotional value, not moral value, but real value. What can you do that others need and that not everyone can do? When you can answer that question, you'll know what you need to learn next. And here's what makes many people hesitate. Learning a new skill always makes you feel clumsy at first. You won't be good right away. You'll make mistakes. You'll have to be a beginner again from scratch. But there is no other path. Being clumsy today is a small price to pay. To avoid a limited life, you can keep your old skills and keep your familiar safety. Or you can accept the discomfort of learning to buy yourself more choices for the future. Life doesn't require you to be perfect. It only requires you to evolve. And when you start learning the skills, your future needs, you'll realize something very interesting. Opportunity no longer has to be chased. It starts looking for the people who are ready. And this is where a silent enemy appears. Not a lack of ability, not a lack of opportunity, but comfort, the thing that makes you delay learning and keeps you in what's familiar. Principle 5. Comfort is the silent enemy of growth. There is an enemy more dangerous than failure. It isn't loud. It doesn't attack you head on. It doesn't hurt you immediately. That enemy is comfort. Comfort doesn't knock you down in a day. It lulls you to sleep over many years. You still go to work. You still get things done. You still feel like you're fine. But deep down, you know you're no longer moving forward. Comfort is subtle. It doesn't say, do nothing. It says, tomorrow is fine. And that tomorrow can stretch into an entire decade. I've seen so many people with huge potential whose lives pass by in silence. Not because they're incapable, but because they chose a life easy enough that they didn't have to change. The truth is this: all growth begins with discomfort. Muscle only grows when it's strained. Your mind only expands when it's challenged. Your character only becomes strong when it's tested. Without pressure, without friction, without the feeling of, I'm not enough yet, there is no evolution. But comfort always whispers, you've done enough. You deserve a break. You don't need to push any further. And the dangerous part is, it sounds very reasonable. I used to believe it. I used to think that if I avoided hardship, life would feel easier. But then I realized a paradox. The easier life got, the weaker I became. Every time I avoided the hard thing, I was teaching myself the wrong lesson, that growth is optional. And when growth becomes optional, stagnation becomes the default. Comfort doesn't kill your dreams immediately. It just makes you forget you ever had dreams. Watch a life that feels too okay. No crisis, no pressure, no new challenges. At first it looks safe, but over time it becomes cramped because the world doesn't stand still. If you aren't actively growing, you're falling behind, even if it doesn't feel like you're moving backward. Comfort keeps you in the same old skills, the same old mindset, the same old choices. And then you wonder why opportunities keep shrinking, options keep narrowing, and freedom keeps getting farther away. Not because life is unfair, but because you stop growing. I want you to understand this clearly. Discipline is always heavy at first, but regret is heavy forever. Comfort gives you relief today, but it sends the bill tomorrow. And that bill is called, if only I had started sooner. If only I hadn't gone so easy on myself. If only I had pushed a little harder. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're not doing something wrong, but you're missing something right. And the difference between an ordinary life and a meaningful life is found in those small choices. Ask yourself, when during the day do I choose what's easy, when I know exactly that what's right is what's hard? Because the answer to that question is exactly where you need to change. You don't need to become a harsh person. You don't need to give up every joy. But you do need to learn how to put growth ahead of comfort, not forever, just long enough for you to become a different person. And once you become that person, what used to be hard will become natural. What used to require discipline will become instinct. That is the reward of growth. And when you start escaping the trap of comfort, you'll realize something even more important. Your vision only becomes real when you yourself are upgraded. Principle 6. A vision only becomes reality when you upgrade yourself. So many people have a vision. They dream of a better life. They picture a more open future. They know very clearly they weren't born to live as confined as they do right now. But then, year after year, the vision is still just a vision. Not because their dream is wrong, but because who they are hasn't caught up to what they can see. A vision is a picture of the future, but skills are the bridge that takes you there. Without a bridge, that picture just hangs on the wall forever. I used to think that if you just had a big enough dream, life would automatically arrange everything. I used to believe that if you truly wanted it badly enough, the path would appear. But life taught me a more sobering lesson. The future doesn't get closer just because you can see it. It gets closer when you become worthy of it. You can picture a successful business, but if you don't learn how to lead, manage, communicate, that vision will collapse the moment it begins to take shape. You can dream of financial freedom, but if you don't learn how to create value, solve problems, and manage yourself, that freedom will always be out of reach. The problem isn't the vision. The problem is the version of you trying to carry that vision on your shoulders. Life is very fair. It doesn't ask what you want. It asks who you become. If who you are today doesn't have the ability to hold the future you want, then that future will pass right by you, not as punishment, but as a law. I've met people who told me, I have so many ideas. I see opportunities others don't see. But when opportunities came, they weren't ready. Not because the opportunity was fake, but because they didn't upgrade themselves fast enough. Vision always runs ahead of the person. That's normal. But if the gap gets too wide, it becomes a burden instead of fuel. You start feeling frustrated. You start doubting yourself. You start thinking maybe you dreamed too big. No, you didn't dream too big. You just didn't grow fast enough. And here's what I want you to understand deeply. Every step forward in life requires a step forward in who you are. You can't live the life of a leader with the skills of a follower. You can't enjoy the freedom of someone who creates value with the habits of someone who only waits for instructions. A vision doesn't automatically turn into reality. It needs discipline. It needs learning. It needs the willingness to become a new person, even when that makes you feel unfamiliar to yourself. Many people love their vision, but don't love the process of upgrading themselves. They want the result, but don't want to become the person that result requires. And that is the biggest contradiction. If you want life at a higher level, you have to accept learning at a higher level. If you want bigger responsibility, you have to accept training yourself more. There is no other way. Ask yourself honestly, the future I'm dreaming about is demanding that I learn what next. Not learning for fun, not learning to show off, but learning to become the version of yourself that can actually hold that vision steady. When you start upgrading yourself every day, something very interesting happens. The vision stops overwhelming you. It becomes specific. It becomes possible. It feels closer. Not because the vision got smaller, but because you got bigger. And then you understand a simple truth. Life doesn't expand in response to begging. It expands in response to competence. But there's one more thing many people don't realize. Even when they have a vision, even when they know they need to upgrade, they still get held back by something very familiar. That is, Principle 7, your market value increases with skills, not with age. There's a very common misunderstanding I've seen for years. People believe time will automatically make them more valuable. They think if they just stay long enough, work enough years, endure long enough, life will reward them. But the market doesn't work that way. Life doesn't pay for seniority. It pays for value. You don't get paid because you've existed for a long time. You get paid because of what problems you can solve. And how many people are willing to pay for that? I've met people who have worked for 20 years, but whose market value has barely changed. And I've also met people who just started, but progressed very fast. The difference isn't age, it's skill set. The market doesn't ask how hard you've tried. It asks, what can you do that not everyone can do? And if you don't have a clear answer to that question, then you're relying on luck, something that is never a foundation for freedom. So many people work hard their whole lives and still live with anxiety, not because they lack work ethic, but because the value they provide can be easily replaced. When your skills are common, your income is limited. When your skills are rare and useful, your options expand. This isn't a judgment, it's a law. If 10,000 people can do what you're doing, the market won't pay a high price for it. But if only a small number of people can do it well, you don't have to go looking for opportunity. Opportunity will look for you. I once said this, your income often reflects how much the market needs you. And the market needs people who can solve problems, take responsibility, produce results. Not people who are just busy. Age can bring experience. But if that experience isn't converted into skill, it's just memory. You can know a lot, but if you can't do more than other people, that knowledge has no market value. And here's the part many people find hard to accept. The market doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care whether you feel you deserve it or not. It only cares about results. That sounds cold, but it's actually very fair because it puts control back in your hands. You can't control your age. You can't change your starting point, but you can upgrade your skills. Every new skill you learn is one more time you expand your market value. Every new problem you can solve is one more time you increase your freedom. And here's the key point. You don't have to be great at everything. You only have to be great at a few important things that the future needs. Don't ask, how much does this job pay? Ask, will this skill lead me to more options? Because money is the result. Skills are the cause. When you focus on upgrading the cause, the result changes automatically. Many people are afraid to start learning a new skill because they don't want to look like a beginner. They fear feeling clumsy. They fear having to start over. But remember, being stuck because you're protecting your pride hurts far more than starting over. If you don't upgrade your market value, you're placing your future in someone else's hands, and that's a very fragile position. Freedom doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being needed. And when you become someone who is needed, you don't have to ask permission to live life your own way. But there's one final question that needs to be answered. When you understand that skills determine freedom, how do you start in a systematic way instead of relying on temporary inspiration? Principle 8, the 30-60-90-day formula to break through personal limits. There's something I learned after years of watching people change. Life rarely changes in a single explosive moment. It changes through time windows that are short enough that you don't quit and long enough that you truly become a different person. That's why I believe in simple cycles. Not because they're magical, but because they're doable. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, not to become perfect, but to overcome old inertia, the thing that has kept you in the same place for years. The first 30 days aren't for winning, they're for waking up. In the first 30 days, you don't need to be good. You just need to show up every day. This is the stage where you learn the basics. You read, you listen, you observe, you start realizing how much you've overlooked in the past. You see more clearly the gaps in your thinking and your skills. And that feeling is often uncomfortable because awareness always comes with humility. A lot of people quit here not because it's too hard, but because they don't like the feeling of not being as good as they imagined. But if you make it through the first 30 days, something very important happens. You start changing how you see yourself. The next 60 days are the training phase. No more learning for fun, no more listening just to feel better. Now, you start doing. And when you do, you will mess up. A lot, publicly, enough to challenge your ego. But right here is where you start building something no school teaches. Real competence. You stop asking, what do I know? And you start asking, what can I do? Every mistake in this phase is a very valuable tuition payment because it teaches you things theory can never touch. And then, if you stay consistent through 90 days, you enter the transformation phase. At this point, you don't have to force yourself as much as before. What used to be hard starts to feel familiar. You no longer feel like you're trying. You feel like you're becoming. This is when the world starts responding. People notice. Small opportunities appear. Signals show up that you're no longer at the starting line. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've become different. And here is the most important part of this formula. It doesn't change your circumstances first. It changes you first. When you change, your circumstances are forced to adjust. Many people want to change their lives, but don't want to commit to a cycle long enough. They start with inspiration, but stop when inspiration runs out. 30, 60, 90 days doesn't depend on inspiration. It depends on a decision that you won't judge results too early, a decision that you won't quit halfway through, a decision that you allow yourself to become a new person, even if the process is uncomfortable. You don't have to change your entire life in 90 days. You just have to change the trajectory. A small shift today becomes a very large distance in the coming years. And if you ask me what the biggest mistake people make is, I would say this: they underestimate what they can do in 90 days and overestimate what they can do in a week. Freedom doesn't come from reckless leaps. It comes from intentional cycles of self-upgrading. 30 days to wake up, 60 days to train, 90 days to transform, If you're willing to commit to that, I can tell you with absolute certainty, you will not be the same person anymore. And that's when we return to the biggest question of life. Will you pay the price of freedom with conscious discipline or with long-lasting regret? In the end, every road leads back to one very simple question. Not, what do you want? Not, how big do you dream? But, who are you willing to become to deserve it? Life doesn't judge your dream. It doesn't laugh at your vision. And it doesn't care whether you started early or late. Life quietly watches only one thing. Did you pay the right price that freedom demands? So many people go through their whole lives still believing they're stuck because of circumstances, because of age, because of where they started, because of other people. But the truth is often simpler and harder to accept. They aren't stuck. They just didn't change for long enough. Freedom doesn't come from one big decision in a single day. It comes from very small choices, repeated in silence, when no one sees, when there's no praise, when there are no immediate results. Every time you choose discipline instead of comfort, every time you choose learning instead of procrastination, every time you choose to upgrade yourself instead of complaining, you're quietly paying tuition for a bigger life. No one can do that for you, and no one can take it away from you. Once you have changed, and here's the most important thing I want you to take with you after this video, you don't need to see the whole path. You just need to be honest about the next step. One skill to learn, one habit to quit, one commitment to keep for 30 days, then 60 days, then 90 days, not to become perfect, but to no longer be the old you, because at some point, life will ask you a question, not in words, but in results. Did you use your potential, or did you only protect your comfort? And in that moment, you won't be able to blame anyone else. There are only two kinds of people in the world. Those who paid the price with discipline, and those who are paying the price with regret. If this video made you pause and think, hit subscribe, not to watch more videos, but to remind yourself that you chose the path of growth. Every day here, we'll work together to break down deep principles of discipline, vision, and freedom, so you don't just understand life, but live at a higher level. And if there's someone in your mind who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Because sometimes one sentence at the right time can change an entire life trajectory. Thank you for staying until the end. The choice is yours. And it begins today.